Hello there, I'm Michael Johnson, and today I'm going to be discussing this. The Dark Knight Returns. This particular novel was written by Frank Miller, who also did the artwork, along with inker Claude Janson, colorist Lynn Varley, and letterer John Costanza. As I'm sure you may have guessed, this title was published by DC Comics. Its original form was a 4-issue miniseries. However, it has received more notoriety as a collection of 244 pages of pure genius, and today stands atop the mountain of Bronze Age comics as the moment that Batman was forever changed. Frank Miller's influence has undoubtedly changed the course of Batman's life forever. In order to understand just how much, we have to look to the past. If you, like me, grew up with that version of Batman, then reading Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns is going to seem extremely foreign and weird, and even a little bit strange because it's not campy, it's not funny, it's actually quite humorless and very serious. Because of Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns, we now see a resurgence of the character in a much different light, and many of us are now more familiar with this version of Batman.
Where do we begin? It's simple. Kill the Batman. Here's my card. You either die a hero, or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
As you can see, the two versions of Batman are basically night and day. You have the campy version from the 60s that was essentially created by Bill Finger and Bob Kane. And then you have the version that we all know from the movies The Dark Knight, Batman Begins, etc., that all stemmed from this one comic, The Dark Knight Returns. In terms of comic books and how they influence the media, without Frank Miller's version of Batman, you would not have had the darker and grittier version that we see in comics, movies, or television today. Could you imagine the late great Adam West appearing on Gotham in his spandex costume? After being retired for a decade, Batman, now 55, comes back to fight crime in the crumbling heap that is Gotham. James Gordon, the longtime police commissioner, is on the verge of retiring. When we pick apart The Dark Knight Returns, we must look at it from two positions to decide whose story it is. We have Batman and Bruce Wayne, both the same but also vastly different people. For me, this is the story of Bruce Wayne and his struggle to be normal, his struggle to not be the vigilante. He strives to keep the darkness buried deep inside him, but yet he also secretly wishes to die. In these 2 pages of The Dark Knight Returns, we see Bruce Wayne knowing full well that there's a gang on the loose and he's waiting for a fight. And when he's about to get it, he does nothing. And what's worse, they do nothing because he's into it. Instead of being the vigilante he knows that he is, he just sits there crying to himself. What he really wants to do is just die. One of the best aspects of Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns is that if you've never read Batman before, you can easily pick this book up and not be lost. Frank Miller provides enough exposition through a masterfully crafted story to allow you to fill in the gaps of Batman's life prior to this. We know, by way of an editorial written by Jimmy Olsen for the Daily Planet, that Batman has, for all intents and purposes, vanished, and honestly, that no one else in the Justice League cared much for him. We see the mantle of Robin, as played by Jason Todd, cased in glass in the cobwebbed and dusty dankness of the Batcave. The death weighs very heavily on Bruce Wayne, and causes him to give up being Batman. Within the course of the first book, we see Bruce Wayne try his hardest to not become Batman again, but he can only fight so long because a new gang, the Mutants, led by the man he thought was cured, Harvey Dent aka Two-Face, rob and kill for no other reason than enjoyment. They breed chaos in Gotham. Because of this gang, Bruce Wayne returns to the cowl of the Caped Crusader, but gone is the Batman that many of us grew up with. This one is dark and brutal. He has changed to fit the seedy underbelly that is Gotham. During one of his first times out back as Batman, he helps a pair of teenage girls. The surviving girl, Carrie Kelly, buys a Robin knockoff costume and becomes, by her own hand, Robin. Eventually, Batman takes her under his formidable wing to train her. This decision marks a great character arc for Batman, as well as Bruce Wayne, as for the past decade, they've been haunted by the death of Jason Todd. Bruce Wayne, having embraced Batman and able to recover, finally, from the loss of Jason Todd, is now much stronger. The Dark Knight Returns follows the classic three-act structure. The second act begins on page 26 of the second book, where we see Batman, having been beaten by the mutants and saved by Carrie Kelly, is nursed back to health and decides to move forward with training her. She becomes the first female Robin. In this act, we also see Superman mobilize and Joker coming for Batman. The third act begins with the fourth book in the series. The Joker is defeated, but now Batman has become an enemy of the country. The former gang members of the mutants have mobilized under Batman and has become sort of an army for him. The act culminates in an epic battle between Batman and Superman after Batman decides to take these former gang members and train them to use non-lethal tactics to take out criminals. One of the reasons The Dark Knight Returns is such an easy read and a good read is because Frank Miller uses transitions in what McCloud would call moment to moment, or the first style a comic book artist would utilize to tell the transition of time. He also tends to utilize the second style a lot as well for action to action. In many instances, Miller would use as many as 16 panels, using minute actions so that the reader is pulled into the action and into the direction we're meant to read. We don't miss anything and are never lost by the style. It is written more like a film, with each panel becoming one frame of a larger picture. Frank Miller also doesn't break any of the normal comic book rules that we have learned. He always writes from left to right in a Z pattern. You never get lost, you never get confused, and everything works and reads like a own mini comic on each individual page. This was my first time reading The Dark Knight Returns. It, along with a handful of other comics, including The Killing Joke and The Watchmen, have set the bar extremely high for comic books. They essentially take a medium that many people feel is for children and turn it into actual literature, and that makes them increasingly important. Time chose the collected edition as one of the top 10 best English language graphic novels ever written. If you're into Batman, even if you're not, you just like good literature, and this really is literature, I highly recommend that you pick up The Dark Knight Returns and read it. Thank you. Again, my name is Mike Johnson. This has been my presentation. Hope you enjoyed it.